Hi there, and welcome to part 2 of my watercolor Christmas ornament series. My name is Erin Eno, and these are the 2 ornaments that I did in part 1. So if you're interested in seeing that video, there is a link to that in the description box below. Today we are going to do 2 more ornaments. We're going to do a simplified version of the gnome where he's on a background, so you don't have to worry about where you're laying down the watercolor ground. And we're also going to do a quick little winter landscape. So let's just jump right in and get started. Okay, so the first thing you'll need is the watercolor ground. I'm using Daniel Smith's. I have both transparent and titanium white. For these 2 ornaments, we're just going to be using the titanium white. I also have an 80mm round Christmas ornament, and I will also be using a 70mm 2-piece ornament, which you'll see coming up in the video. So they recommend that you rough up the surface before applying the ground. I didn't want to do that to my ornaments. I wanted to make sure they were nice and shiny, so I just cleaned everything with rubbing alcohol, and that seemed to work just fine. So now that the ornaments are clean, we can apply the watercolor ground. Make sure you have a brush that has fairly soft bristles, and because we're not doing, very fine shapes in the ground, I'm using a wider brush, and it makes for less brush strokes. And you may also find that as you're painting on the ground, it kind of clumps up on the brush. So you can dilute the watercolor ground, but I didn't really dilute it this time, but I would every now and then just go in and rinse off my brush and get the clumps off, and that seemed to do the trick. So just try to do long, even strokes, and just try to smooth out the brush strokes as you go along. So I continued and did the same kind of rough rectangular shape on the back as well. And once those were dry to the touch at the very least, I went in and put on another coat. So after you have 2 coats, you have to let it sit and not just dry, you have to let it cure for 24 to 48 hours. If you don't let it cure properly, when you wet it, when you're applying the paint, you can reactivate it and lift it up. So just make sure you let it cure. And here is the 2-piece ornament for the landscape version, and I didn't record it when I put the ground on. So basically I just did a very loose sketch that just popped up there, as you can see, very loose. That was just the idea that I had in my head, and I didn't follow it precisely when I put the watercolor ground on, but I just kind of winged it, as you'll see further in the video. I do want to point out though that if you are going to use the 2-piece ornaments, when they go together, one fits inside the other with a little lip. So when you put the watercolor ground on, be careful not to get ground all over that lip, or you won't be able to get the ornament pieces together once everything's done and dried. Okay, so now that the watercolor ground is dried and cured, it's on to painting the ornaments. So I have my Van Gogh paints in my palette, as always. I also have my metallic paints here. And for brushes, I have a size 10 round and a size 6 round. These are both brushes from Curry's, which is a local art store near me. So just get brushes of, those sizes. And I also have my Princeton Snap in a size 2. In addition to that, I may be using my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, and I also have, which is an interesting little item, it's a Sharpie paint pen, and it's white. It's oil based, so it does stay on the plastic. If you don't have one of these, you can always just use watercolor ground, because I'm just using it to do little snowflakes on the globe. So I'll just put that aside for now. And I think we're going to start with the ornament that has the gnome on it. So if you saw part 1, you saw me draw a gnome. If you didn't see part one, I'll just quickly draw one out for you now. Okay, so basically you just start with a big kind of floppy hat. And then his nose is in the middle. And the hat comes down over his eyes and then gets kind of caught on his nose like so. Okay, and then you have his beard. Which I just like to make it roughly the same height as his hat. Okay, and then his body comes just past his beard a little bit. Okay, and then you put little shoes on him, like so. You can do some stripes. I did stripes on the last one. I think I'll do stripes again. Okay, and then put a little mouth on him. And he's waving. Little mitten hand. And then a sign there. That's going to say Merry Christmas. Like that. Okay, so for the back view, I'm just going to fold my paper over and trace over him. Okay, so now I'm going to draw the gnome just roughly on the ornament. The difference between this ornament and the first ornament is I actually did them just as like a silhouette, no background on them. So this is a little easier for when you put the watercolor ground on, because you don't have to, you know, put it down in the shape of the gnome. So I'll just lightly sketch him in here. So just like that. And then I will draw him on the back as well, going the opposite direction. Sorry for the paper noise. So I'm going to start his hat at the same kind of point here. It's a little darker than I want, so I'm just going to try to pick some of that up with my Kneadable Eraser. Okay, and he's going to be standing in the snow. So there's going to be snow about here. We'll put it down here. Okay, so now we are ready to paint. Okay, so I'm just going to start with my number 6 brush. Okay, and I'm just going to do light kind of wash. The sweater is going to be red as well. His beard's a little off center. I'm not sure if I'm digging that. So while it's still wet, I'm just going to take stronger pigment and tap it in just to get some shadows and some wrinkles in his hat. Okay, and some shadows on his arm just for shape. That went a little wild. I find the paint travels quite quickly on this ground. Okay. I didn't mean quite quickly, I meant quite far. And this is traveling way further than I thought. Okay. Whoops, I got some on his beard. I don't want his beard red. And we'll do green mittens on him. I'm going to switch to my smaller brush, so it doesn't hold quite as much water and it won't get away on me. And I won't do his sweater yet. And go in and do his little boots. Okay, for his beard, we're just going with a very light wash of the black just to get some kind of shadows on his beard there. Okay, and that's going to dry lighter, so just blend it out a bit. And we'll just get a little bit of yellow with some orange, just to get a little bit of a, well, very light wash of a skin color for his nose. Actually, you know what, I'm going to do it with a little bit of pink in there. Okay, and we'll just do his nose. Like so. Now I'm going to go in with the green and we'll just do some little stripe here of the green. I'm just going to try to clean this up a bit. There, just to get a sharper edge on that side. I'm just going to pick up a bit of highlight on his mitten. And I'll put a little bit of pink in his nose here. There we go. And we'll grab a little bit of the black and just put his little mouth. Like so. And then I'm going to do his sign. I'm not liking what's going on with his beard there. It's not very... I'm just going to wet the edge and try to get a sharper, defined line on his beard here. The paint lifts quite easily on the ground, I find, so that's a good thing if you want to go and lift it to sharpen up the edges, like so. Now I'm going to go in with a little bit of a bigger brush and just grab some brown. And we're going to paint the sign. We can go in and just put some shading on the snow a little bit, just under where he's standing. Just to put a little bit of a shadow there for him. Nothing too drastic. And while that's drying, I'm going to mix up a blue for the sky. Oh, actually I've got blue in my palette here. It's a little bit of indigo with some cerulean blue. And I'm just going to paint the background sky. Just going to go in and darken it up a bit. Okay, so now that that's dry, I'm just going to go in with my number 2 and a little bit of that brown and just do some wood grain lines, just lightly. Maybe not that light. Actually, you know what? I don't like that. I'm going to use a smaller brush. So I've got my number 0 here. This will be better. Okay. That number 2 was too big. Okay, so just like that. I don't want to do too much. And then now that the background is dry, I'm going to put in some snowflakes. So this is where I'm going to use the bleed-proof white. Now you can use white gouache or white acrylic paint, whatever you have. I think even a white gel pen would work fine as well. I don't want to splatter it because I just don't know. I want a little more control. So I'm just going to do actual dots. You could splatter it. You could give it a go. Okay. Now I'm going to dry this carefully so I don't melt my ornament. Okay, so now I'm going to write Merry Christmas on the sign. Actually, I'm going to leave that out. Okay, so I just want to go back in with the black and darken up his little boots a bit. And then also with my number 0 brush and the bleed-proof white, I'm just going to go in and put some little kind of snowflakes on his sweater. Okay, so there he is, your little Christmas gnome, and now I'm just going to wait for him to completely dry and I will do the reverse image on the back. So now I'll just pop the top back on. And there you go. There's your finished gnome ornament. Now we'll move on and do the landscape one. So now onto our little mini winter landscape. I'm going to start with my number 2 brush, and I'm going to start with the house. And I'm going to do the roof in brown. I'm going to leave part of it white so it looks like there's like snow on the roof. Okay. Just like that. And the actual house, I think I'll do red. And I'm going to put it partly in the snow and partly not in the snow. So it looks like the snow's kind of coming up the side of it. And I'm going to put a door on it later, but I'll just do that in black so I can paint right over it. But I do want to leave some windows at the side, like so. Make this angled up a bit. We're not looking for perfection here, obviously. So I'm just going to dry off this section here just because I want that a little bit darker. So I'm going to put a little bit of black in there. So it's just got a bit of shadow here. I don't want it to bleed. Maybe I should have waited, but there we go. That's good enough. And I'm going to do the windows yellow, like there's light inside, but I will wait for that. And then here, I'm going to put a clump of trees. So I'm just going to wet that a little bit, not too much. I don't want it sopping wet, but I'm just want some of the trees to be kind of fuzzy, blurred out, you know, like they're kind of in the distance a little bit. And then we'll do some sharper trees on top of those once those are dry. So we're just going to take some green, a little bit of blue to make it a nice deep green. Maybe a little bit of black. And I'm going to dry off my brush, just get a little bit of that pigment, and just, it's kind of hard to do this on round ornament. But I kind of want these trees to kind of fill that background. So these are bleeding out a little more than I would like, but that's okay. I'm just going to put some sharper trees on top and it'll look like a clump of trees. So we'll just wait till it dries a little bit. And I'm going to put a little bit of shading. For the shading, I'm just going to do kind of blue with a little bit of black in it. And just a light wash. Just to get some shading from the house. Okay, so now I'm just going to dry the house a bit so I can get the lights in there. So I'm just going to put pure yellow in where the lights are, where the windows are. And now that the house is dry, I can go and put a little bit of shading on that as well. So just with the red, actually I'm going to use a little bit of green to darken that up. There we go. Just do a little line of shading under the roof here. That's really not even... Okay, and that just bled into the light, so I don't like that. I'll have to wait a little bit. But I can put some shading here. Just so that one side is a little darker. And I'll have to go back in and touch up the lights. There we go. Okay, so the trees are dry, so I can go over them and do the darker trees now. Again, I'll add a little bit of blue. I'm adding indigo, so it's really dark. And it's hard to paint on curved. I think I said that already, didn't I? Just going to do that. I'm just tapping in. Not being really fussy, obviously, you can see that. Do another guy beside him. So I'm going to bring the branches right down to the snow. And then go in with just a little bit of black, just to deepen up. Just a little bit in here. And then I will just, with a damp brush, just run my brush along the bottom so it kind of softens the edge, the bottom edges of those trees and makes kind of like a little bit of a snow mound shadow. And the house is dry, so again with the black, actually, you know what? I'm just going to go do a dark brown. If I just do the brown over the red, it should be a nice dark brown for the door. So there's the door, and I may just put some little lines across the roof. Like little kind of shingles, just like that. Then I'm going to take the light blue, or the blue with a little bit of black in it, and just create some shadows on the snow for the kind of hills in the snow. So I'm going to just make this one here look like it's a little bit of a hill in the distance. So I'm just going to put it here, and then I'm just going to kind of feather that out. That's going to dry lighter, so I'm just going to put a little bit more on there. Just like that. So it just gives it a little bit of depth. Okay, so this is the piece that marries up with it. Now I'm going to do these trees here and get them in place, and then I can decide where I want to add some more shading and stuff. So again, I'm just going to lightly wet this area and just kind of get some trees in the distance here. So I just kind of want a light green background. So when I get the darker trees on top, there's not a lot of white showing through. Does that make sense? I hope so. And then when that dries, we'll put other trees in the foreground. So I'm going to, I think, bring this down here and I'll put a shadow line there. Is that going to work? Yeah. It'll be a little house on the hill. Okay, and I'm going to wet that and just blend it out. And that'll be another hill kind of in the distance. So now I'm going to go in and do these trees in the foreground with a deep kind of bluish green. And then I'm going to get an even darker green with a little bit of black. And just go in and just put a little bit of depth on these trees here. They're not the best trees, but you get the idea. They look like trees. Or they'll give the impression of trees, even if they don't really look like trees. And again, I'll just clean my brush off. And while it's still damp, just run it along the bottom to soften the edges of those trees. Maybe even go in with that shadow color and just kind of create some shadows from the trees. I think I'm going to just do a few little trees peeking up from behind that hill. Okay, so they're peeking through from behind the mountain or hill, rather. So they're just kind of blurry in the distance. Now I think what I will do is go in and darken those trees up even a little bit further. I like those little soft trees there. I should have really put a chimney on that house, but oh well, I did not. And I think maybe I'll start another hill down here, just coming off. See if that flies. And just blend that out as well. Let's see where that would end. It's going to end coming up here. I just didn't want it all plain white. Wanted to put some kind of hills in there. Well, I could poke some trees through here, I guess. Some nice light ones in the background, just peeking through here. Okay, so there's a couple trees there. And I think I just want to go into these guys and darken them up a little bit more. Actually, okay, so now we're going to put some snow on the trees. I'm just going to use my number 0 brush, just a little bit of snow. Again, if you don't have this Dr. P.H. Martin's white bleed proof ink, you can use gouache or acrylic as well. Okay, so I think that looks kind of cute. I want to try to add some shimmer to the snow with my metallic watercolor. So I want to use this silver color here and see if I can add some kind of cool shimmer to the snow in some of the areas. So I don't want a huge brush. So I will start here. Then I'm going to rinse my brush off and also drag that down a bit so it kind of blends out. I don't want harsh edge, I just want a little bit of shimmer. So that's going to marry up with this hill here. And I also don't want to cover that shadow. And then blend that out. And I'm going to do this hill up here as well. And that will marry up with this hill here. I don't know if I would put any on the hill in the back. Maybe I will. I'm kind of going nuts with the silver. I just think it's kind of pretty. I just don't want all silver snow, so I think I'll stop. And I'm going to dry it and make sure that it does maintain that kind of shimmer. Okay, so it is holding the shimmer, but I want to just put one last little hit of it on this hill here, just like that. Now I'm going to go in and put in some snowflakes. So this is where I'm going to use my Sharpie paint pen. So if you don't have something like this, like I'm thinking a Posca pen. I don't have Posca pen, so I don't know how fine the tip is, but they are paint pens too, so they would probably work if the tip is fine enough to give you snowflakes. If not, you can just go in with more of the Watercolour Ground and just tap it on for snowflakes, okay? So I have to shake this. Then you have to kind of push it a bit to get it activated. If you haven't used any pens like this, sorry, that's doing it. There we go. So you push the nib in and it lets the ink come out. So once it's activated, you're good to go. So I'm just going to tap in some snowflakes. So if I was to press and push the nib right in, I'd get a bigger snowflake like that. Okay, some light ones. Do them over the trees a little bit, not too much. I gotta remember to do the right up to the rim on some of these. There we go. Not too many on the trees, not too many in front of the house. And I'll let those dry. Okay, so both halves are completely dry, and I'm hoping you can see the shimmer. I hope that's picking up on camera. So I'm just going to piece them together. Okay, so there is your finished landscape ornament, and I think it turned out quite well. I'm pretty pleased with it. The trees had me nervous there for a while, but I think they turned out okay in the end. So we have our landscape ornament and our two-sided gnome ornament. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and that you'll give it a try on your own. If you do and you're on Instagram, please be sure to share and tag me so I can have a look. I'd love to see what you guys come up with. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know in the comment section below. And that's it for today, guys. I will see you in the next one.